talk about a complete salvation. What does that mean? One thing I think it means is very few are living in awe that Jesus paid such a price for us to have. And we want to live in everything that comes with our salvation because He deserves it. He deserves for us to receive all that He paid the price for us to receive. So it's not just a selfish thing, but it's something I think we're going to see manifested on the earth as we get closer to the end. We're going to see people walking in everything that was given to us through the cross. Okay? And we can't settle for less than that. How do we get there? What does it look like to walk in complete salvation? All the benefits. One thing, we will be a new creation. What does that look like? He's not just trying to fix this creation. I've done a lot of study on the renewing of the mind because I think that's something we need. Most of what is taught is how we renew our mind is how to fix our old man, how to fix our old mind, how to change it and all. No, we need a new mind. We need the mind of Christ. But what does that look like? What does the manifestation of the new creation really look like? Now, one thing, we all get a piece of that. We all see a part. We need to do our part. No one has the complete picture. Nobody. That we all know in part, we prophesy in part, we see in part. So if we're going to have the whole picture, we have to put our parts together, which means we've got to be a member of the body of Christ. We've got to fit in our rightful place. That's one thing that the new creation is going to look like. It's going to be a body. It's not going to be an individual. And it's not just something we do individually, and we cannot do it individually. He has so constructed it, which I'm going to show you in just a minute, that we can only do it together. When we first formed Morning Star Fellowship of Ministry, one thing we didn't want to be was an organization, or just an organization. Hopefully we have some organization, and it's mostly Mary Ann. So Tom helps a little bit. But I'm just saying, but we're supposed to be a family first, not an organization first. All right, we have to keep that. I remember when I started as a young Christian, and I'd only known the Lord about 2 years when people started asking me to speak in conferences and things like that. And I started having this vision of planting churches everywhere. Then I had an encounter with the Lord. Encounters change you more than anything else. And every one I've had, I saw how far out of whack I was. And first, one of the things he said to me, you're not building churches, you're building franchises. They all serve the same burger, the same Coke, the same fry. He said, I'm not in any of them. He said he's not going to be in any of those. And I tell you, I appreciate people that can network and build networks and organize and mobilize and all that. Those are great gifts. But the Lord will bless many things He will not inhabit. We need the Lord, not just a strategy. As Francis Frangipane used to say, we're not called to follow a manual, we're called to follow Emmanuel, a person, and we're to be changed into His image, which we get changed into by seeing His glory. The church will never become what we're called to be by focusing on what the church is called to be. Do you understand that? We need to know it. It needs to be a teaching. It needs to be an emphasis at times. And it's something we do want to build in. But what would the church look like if it was built for the King of Kings to live in and not just built to attract people? What would that look like? Would we be doing all that we're doing now and doing it that way? But, we've had visitations, and those were spectacular and can radically impact you and change you. But still, he didn't stay. The first question the first two disciples had that followed him were, Rabbi, where do you dwell? Not just where do you bless. He'll bless many things he will not dwell in. Just seeking the blessing of the Lord and just being satisfied with that, we've got to have a higher vision. And he will visit places he will not dwell in. But where does he dwell? How would things change if we were totally focused on the place he wants to dwell, the people he wants to dwell in? And that's how we know if something is really him, is when he is there. His manifest presence is there. I remember a meeting I went to. It was a brand new, I don't want to call myself pastor, because if I was a pastor, I'm the worst one I ever heard of. People would come to me for counseling. I would say, get over it. Why are you bringing me all your problems? I got my own problems. They left needing more counsel than they got. But what we're after is him. We see him, we get changed. And listen, the changes we can bring about on ourselves can really help. But they're not going to last through the fire that's coming. The fire is going to test the quality of every person's work. And it's getting intense. And it's going to get more so. And a lot of things we built, matter of fact, all the empires of men, everything that men has built, according to Daniel 2, it's coming down. But that it's shaken, that everything that can be shaken is being shaken now, that's evidence of the Lord's presence. Do you realize in Matthew 24, they asked the Lord basically two main questions. When will these things be? What would be the signs of your presence? They weren't asking about his second coming. That word's parousia in the Greek. It doesn't mean coming. There's a big difference between someone coming and someone being present. They didn't need signs of his coming because the whole world's going to see him. We'll know it. Okay, here he is. They were asking about something else called his parousia, his presence, the manifest presence of the Lord. And they were asking first, he had just mentioned how not a single stone will be left upon another in Jerusalem and in the temple. And they were saying, well, when will those things be? And question number 2, what are the signs of your presence? And we see many of them in Scripture. Psalm 97 said the mountains will melt like wax at the presence of the Lord. Mountains speak of governments in Scripture. What's happening to all of them around the world? Our government's falling apart. Guess what? If you need someone to tell you that every day, but we know that's going to happen. Now, I'm thankful for the godly foundation and everything else, but our government too. Guess what? It's going to shake. Everything that can be shaken, everything that's departed from the godly foundation is going to be shaken. Everything that's not built on the godly foundation, it's going to be shaken. It's going to go. This is all the statue that represents all of man's empires is coming down. But that little stone is going to become a mountain. That little stone that strikes the foot of the statue in Daniel 2. That's Christ. And it's going to grow into a government. Are you seeing his government? Almost all of the conversation of Christians now, I probably started a lot of that, is about what's going wrong in the world. Okay, we've read about that. It's happening. So where's the kingdom? What are the answers? What is, God doing? We need to have a whole lot more attention on what God's doing than what's going on in the world. Now, I believe in being the salt and light we're called to be. We're citizens of the kingdom and citizens in this world, and I want to be a good one, and both counts. But I want to give 10 times more attention to what God's doing than what's going on the earth, what man's doing. We're called to prepare the way for the Lord. How do we do that? We're told in Isaiah 40, build a highway. That's God's higher way. It's not just a strategy. His higher way is his son. All things are going to be summed up in Christ. So the ultimate conclusion is his son. What are we doing to abide in him, to grow up in all things into him, to help his people grow up in all things into him? That's what's going to make a difference when we start growing up into him. Now, you probably heard me teach a lot about the resurrection. We must return to the apostolic gospel. They preach Jesus Christ and the resurrection from the dead. Turn the world upside down. When we get back to that, we're going to have that same kind of impact. But doesn't it say that those are kept in bondage who through fear of death are kept in bondage their whole lives? Do you know the fear of death is what is keeping everybody in bondage that is in bondage? Nothing so destroys the fear of death like the resurrection. But it's more than the doctrine of the resurrection. Spurgeon said, that very few Christians believe in the resurrection. They believe in a doctrine of the resurrection, but if they really believed in the resurrection, their lives would be radically different. They would not be so consumed with the temporary things of this age, of this world. We'd be consumed with eternity. We've got to see the city that Abraham saw. He saw a city that caused him to be willing to leave everything in this world. He was living in the greatest country and culture of the world at the time, where the 7, wonders of the world were, and the greatest culture, and he was obviously a member of the aristocracy of that. He left it all because he had seen the city of God. He had seen what God was still building instead of what men were building. Do we see his city? I think it's because they saw his city. It says Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob lived in tents. They were so wealthy they made kings jealous. They could have built the greatest palace in the world, probably. They weren't interested. They didn't care about what they built in this world for this life. This life is a vapor. They were living for eternity, for the world to come. This life, as wealthy as they were, as wonderful as as the homes could have been that they built, or the palaces, they weren't interested. Tent is fine, because I'm only going to be here a short time. How are we living? What is our kingdom business vision? Now, I hear a lot of noble things. Well, I want to make enough money to support a lot of ministries and missions, get a lot of people saved. That's not the great riches. That's not the riches of the kingdom. That may be noble. Lord told me that I was doing that in pride when I'd built a business that was really successful, and I felt like I got to the point where I could go back into ministry and never have to take up an offering. The Lord was offended by that. You know what he said to me? He said, don't you think I can support my own ministry? Do you think I need you to support what I'm doing? And he asked me to lay my business on the altar. I did. Because usually he'll deal with your heart and then give it back to you, and you're in a better place. He consumed it. I didn't have a chance to get it back off the altar. It was gone. And I hadn't felt better in years. I was freed. I was freed to live. I have to live in faith in him. And but that's the freest we can be. You know who is the freest? Who are the freest people on earth? You know the church that's in perfect unity? Lord showed it to me one time. I was riding that motorcycle I'm sure all of you bought raffle tickets for by now. I had an all-day visitation on that motorcycle, and I'm not saying if you get that bike, you're going to have a visitation like that. That was not the Lord's dwelling place, but he visited me on it all day long one day. And I rode over 740 some miles in one day on that motorcycle. Now, motorcycle miles are to car miles like dog years are to human years. I mean, it's a whole lot more fun than a car, but it's like 7 miles on a motorcycle. I mean, 1 mile on a motorcycle is equal to 7 miles, maybe 10 or 20 miles in a car or whatever. I'm just saying. But, you know, that's not his dwelling place. His dwelling place is in us. And I forgot what I was going to say. Pardon? Yeah, but that's not what I was going to say. I did have one. What? Unity. Okay. He's told me he was going to show me the church in perfect unity. And he directed me up in the mountains to this little Baptist church. And I just said, no way the Baptists did that. No way. He said, not there, next door. The graveyard. All those Christians are in perfect unity. He said, and if you want perfect unity in your church, they're going to be as dead as these people are. They're going to be in unity because they don't care. If they're fighting, it's because they care. They care enough to fight. And anyway, you know, we do want unity, but we want God's concept of unity, not ours. Ours is getting along, having the same doctrines on. None of that matters to him. We can only find his unity in him, by abiding in him. And you know who the freest people in the world are today? The deadest. You know, a dead man doesn't fear rejection. Dead man doesn't fear the Democrats taking over. Dead men, you know, really has no fear. And all the bondage in this world comes through fear. Fear of death is the main one. If we really believed in the resurrection, start living for the resurrection, living in the resurrection now, our lives would be different. It's not just believing in the doctrine, it's believing in having the life that is in that doctrine. Do we see Jesus? Do we really believe? Or are we consumed with the temporary things of this world? I'm just saying the demons believe in the doctrine of the atonement. They believe better than some Christians, I think. Are they saved? We've got to understand what believe means. You know, throughout the scripture where it says, those who believe in the Lord shall be saved, you know that word in, if you read it in the Greek, I'll ask Nick about this later, but it's into. If you believe into the Lord, you shall be saved. It's not just intellectually assenting to a doctrine. And this is a process. It is something that takes time. But it's not just figuring out the teachings, not just figuring out the doctrine. It's getting closer to a person. And it's following that person. The truth is a person. The way is a person. Okay, Jesus made atonement, which is at one-ment. He reconciled us to God. And this includes what he won for us on the cross, includes complete deliverance from the curse of the fall. All of its consequences. Are we free from that? What does a life look like that is walking in complete deliverance from the curse? Now, I'm one to be talking. I just suffered a stroke. A few other things that really got my attention on something I wasn't walking in, called patience. You know, he showed me that impatience was my worst flaw, and it was causing me to miss him most of the time. When he first showed me that, I said, my response to the Lord, I said, I don't think I've even been in your will, but maybe 20% of the time. And he agreed with that. He said, that's about right. He said, that's way more than most of his people. Now, there's a good and acceptable and perfect will of the Lord. I wasn't doing what we would think of as sin. I may have been doing things that were acceptable to him, maybe even bringing blessings to some people, but he had a much higher purpose for me. There is a big difference in the perfect will of the Lord over the good or the acceptable. And you know, most ministry that we call ministry today is what Scripture calls outer court, where the only light in the outer court was natural light. And we're doing the things we're doing with natural light, natural understanding. The acacia wood's all hanging out there. The acacia wood represented humanity. It's a very twisted, gnarled, knotty wood. They say it's one of the most difficult woods to make anything out of. That's what he chose to make his dwelling place out of. Us. That acacia wood is us. And it was all exposed in the outer court. All of our humanity's hanging out. So we make excuses for it, like I'm not perfect yet. The Lord's still working on me. Of course he is. Guess what? You didn't have to tell anybody you weren't perfect yet. But why are we sick? Why are God's people still sick? You know, God didn't afflict me with that stroke. The devil didn't do it. You know who did it? I did it. The doctors couldn't figure out why I had a stroke, how I had it. There's just no evidence. And then they said, "Are you taking any prescriptions?" I said, "Yeah, I take these small dosage of a blood pressure medicine." They said, "Well, did you just quit taking it?" I said, "Yeah." They said, "Read the side effects for if you quit taking it." Stroke. And you know why I did that? My impatience. I said, "I'm lowering my blood pressure myself. I don't need this medicine. I'm going to quit." And that was a good thing to do. I need to do it according to the instructions. It's my pride. I don't need the instructions. I'm just going to quit. Well, the Lord just used it. It's one of the best things that ever happened to me. I'm recommending strokes to all of my friends now. When you're paralyzed, I learned what it meant to wait upon the Lord. You can lift up your weight. I saw him in ways and places and people I'd never seen him before. And he said, "You've been missing this all along. You missed miracles I wanted to do through you because you were so impatient on your own agenda, going your own. You missed divine connections. I was missing him way more than I was walking. I wasn't doing things wrong. I just wasn't doing his will. I was not abiding in him." But why are Christians sick at all? Didn't the scripture say in Proverbs 26:2, "A curse without a cause does not alight"? So if any of the things that are mentioned in scripture that are part of the curse of the fall have alighted on us, there is a cause. We need to find that cause. I'm going to tell you today what the number one cause is for all the afflictions that we're supposed to be free of, that Jesus paid the price for us to be totally free of. There's one main thing that's tripping us up. Now, there are other things too, but there's one main thing. As we're told in Galatians 3:10, "For as many as are the works of the law are under the curse. For it is written, cursed is everyone who does not abide in the things written in the book of the law to perform them." Now he's telling them, if you want to live under the law, if you try to keep just one, you've got to keep them all. And I want to tell you, many Christians are living far more under the law, under legalism, under a legalistic mentality, than they are the liberty that has been paid for us by the cross. We're measuring our relationship to the Lord every day. Have we prayed enough? Have we done enough things? It's like the tree of the knowledge of good and evil instead of the tree of the life. Tree of life that we've been called to eat of. We need a revelation on being delivered from the law, from the legalistic mentality. We're judging ourselves, we're judging each other, we're judging our government, we're judging almost everything according to a standard. Now, it's good, the law, as Paul wrote in Galatians, the law is good if you use it lawfully. It's made for murderers, for the rebellious, and he goes on to list all the crimes. These people need the law. They haven't found grace yet. You've got to use the law for people that have not found grace. His people are supposed to be living under grace. No one should ever tell us we don't need to murder somebody. I remember when the Toronto blessing came around, and it really was a blessing. It really was, I think, a major move of God. But I remember, how people would get up and give their testimonies, how laughing delivered them of a lot of stuff. I remember this one guy got up right here in Charlotte. Tom, you may have been in that meeting. I know Robin McMahon was, but this guy gets up and testifies. He said, listen, let me tell you what this divine laughter has done for me. I was really wanting to kill my wife. He said, now I no longer want to kill her. I'm thinking, I bet she better pray for him from now on. I bet she doesn't quit. You better hope he doesn't backslide. Yeah. So what a revelation. It's wrong for me to kill my wife. I'm just saying, if any of you are having those thoughts, they're not the Lord. He came to save life, not take it. But if you were dead to yourself like we're called to be, you wouldn't want to be killing anybody. You're already dead. And you would embrace any kind of discipline or anything that happens in your life as an opportunity to die more. Because when we die with him, we are raised with him. There will be a resurrection, and we start walking in the power of the resurrection. You can only walk in resurrection if you first died. And, we're called to take up our crosses daily. Do you know every day the Lord gives us an opportunity to die? Most of us miss it. He wouldn't tell us to do that if he wasn't going to give us the opportunity. Every day there's some way that we could die to self and see the Lord glorified, see the Lord. And most of the time we miss it. We don't even see him because we're not looking for that. If we really understood the cross and how much being crucified with him results in us being raised with him now, we would be intently looking for every opportunity. If we really believed and lived by how God resists the proud and gives his grace to the humble, we would be trying all day to seize every opportunity to humble ourselves. We wouldn't go into conversations wanting to make ourselves look better and bigger. We would be seeking how we can humble ourselves to receive more of his grace. So, just being a doctor and believing the doctrine doesn't mean anything if we're not living it. Matter of fact, it brings judgment if we're not living it. But it says, Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law, having become a curse for us. We were crucified with him. For it is written, cursed is everyone who hangs on a tree, in order that in Christ Jesus the blessing of Abraham might come to the Gentiles, so that we would receive the promise of the Spirit through faith. Why do we receive the promise of the Spirit through faith, but then go on trying to live under the law? The do's and the do-nots and we're trying to abide in a person. Do we have our eyes on a person that we're following? That we're seeking to get closer and closer to? If the curse is still clinging to us in any way, there's a cause. There is a cause. There's a gate of hell open in our life. Gates of hell are where hell gets in. And the main way is legalism. It says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Really? I hear this being claimed all the time, but who's really walking in this? We got to walk in these things. Jesus said to the centurion, go, it shall be done to you as you have believed. And his servant was healed that very moment. Have you ever wondered why it seemed to be centurions military people who would have the most faith. It was a centurion that he sent as the gospel first to the Gentiles through a centurion. There's something of the military, they teach you authority. You recognize authority. You can get it other ways. I believe the woman who had the issue of blood, she recognized Jesus in a special way, and that's faith. True faith is simply recognizing Jesus, who he is and where he sits. It's not a faith in our faith. It's not how much we can work up our belief. That's not faith. Faith is seeing him. She knew he was the high priest. Somehow she had a revelation he was a high priest, because on the hem of the high priest's garment, there are bells interchanged with pomegranates all the way around the hem of his garment. And pomegranates were used for medicine in those days. So anytime the high priest moved, the bells would be struck by the pomegranates. Bells speak of proclamations, so the message of healing went forth. You could always tell where the high priest was by the message of healing, the bells and the pomegranates clanging together. What did Jesus do everywhere he went? She somehow perceived, I believe by revelation, he's the high priest. And the hem of his garment represents the healing that he sounds forth everywhere he goes. He healed everywhere he went. Listen, when we walk in this, we're going to start healing everywhere we go. We're going to be healed and we're going to become healers. The centurion saw Jesus' authority. So all you have to do is say the word, it'll be done. Now, men of Israel, you remember when the man was healed on the portico of Solomon? They all came running together. What could have done this? This guy was really bad off. Peter says, men of Israel, why are you amazed at this? Or why do you gaze at us as if by our power or piety we made him walk? I know people today that believe when they get pious enough, and they get righteous enough, when their minds have been renewed enough, they're going to be able to do all this stuff. That's a deception. That is a major deception. It's not about us. The newest, youngest Christian can walk in all the power of Christ if they keep their focus on the Lord and who he is rather than who they are. We will never become who we're called to be by learning who we're called to be. Do you understand that? If that becomes our focus, who we are in Christ. Lord told me back in late 80s, he said one day, he said that one of the biggest deceptions coming upon the body of Christ is the over-focus on who they are in him rather than who he is in us. Do you get that? Those two things are different. Who is he? And the faith which comes through him has given him his perfect health in the presence of you all. Faith comes from him, comes through him. Doesn't he say faith comes by hearing and hearing the word of Christ? You know what the Lord gave Christ his faith? He only did what he saw the Father doing. He was so close to the Father, could see what the Father's doing, and all he did was stay close. Keep his focus on the Lord and stay close. That's what we're after. Now, okay, so we're going to throw off that legalism, right? there's one other thing we got to do. Believe it or not, before the end can come, we're going to have to love each other. Christians are going to have to love each other. What does it say? 1 John 1, 6 and 7? If we say we have fellowship with him and yet walk in darkness, we lie and do not practice the truth. But if we walk in the light as he himself is in the light, we have fellowship, and that word is koinonia, with one another, and the blood of Jesus, his son, cleanses us from all sin. We don't have, he's not saying, it does not say if we abide in the light as he is in the light, we have ecclesia. I tell you, that's been a major diversion. Seek an organization. Ecclesia is the organization, the government, how you do things before having koinonia, which is fellowship. Bonding together so close that if you separate one from the other, they both die. We're supposed to be that close in his body, and we're going to have to get there because there are parts to this. I've just been sharing part of this revelation. And you know where the other part's going to come from? One another, our fellowship in his body. Because he's the one who's orchestrating it. I'm just pointing you in a certain direction of what to seek. He's got to become our teacher. He has to become our shepherd, where we're following a person. And he can speak to us in many different ways, and he often does, but it's almost always through people, through his people. Paul didn't say, I have the mind of Christ. He said, we have the mind of Christ. It takes all of us coming together to have his mind. He says in 1 Corinthians 11, therefore, whoever eats this bread or drinks the cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner shall be guilty of the body and the blood of the Lord. But a man must examine himself, and in so doing eat of the bread and drink of the cup. For he who eats and drinks judgment to himself if he does not judge the body rightly. For this reason, many among you are weak and sick, and a number sleep, for not discerning his body. Now what we do, we take communion, we'll sit there and take a few minutes to confess our sins and all, which is always a good idea. That's not what he's talking about here. It's the sins against his body that he's talking about, that bring division to his body, that bring separation between his people, that he died to make us one. Was the main thing he prayed over and over his last night on the earth, for the unity of his people. And how do we, if you partake of communion in an unworthy manner, it brings judgment upon you. What is an unworthy manner? It's to think that we can eat some bread and drink some wine and have koinonia. That word is koinonia here. Think that we can partake of a ritual and it will substitute for the reality that we're supposed to have in our life. To eat and drink of the cup and eat the bread in a worthy manner is to do it because you have communion. Not that you think this bread and this wine, you can eat all the bread and drink all the wine in Charlotte and not have communion. It's a symbolic ritual that is supposed to be a reality in our life. What I'm saying is we cannot come to this until we have true koinonia. That was the commitment when MFM was formed. We don't want to start a network. It may become a network. We may network together and all that. It's fine. But that's not our goal. Let what happens because of fellowship. because of being bonded together, loving one another, and seeing him in one another, where he is in his body, he is in his temple. You cannot be joined to the head without also being joined to his body. I know a lot of people say, well, as soon as the body of Christ gets his act together, I'm coming back. You won't. You won't even see it come together because it's going to be so far down the tracks, you'll never catch up. If you don't go through the process with his body to come to that unity, learning to love each other. And, if you haven't been hurt, you haven't been in the game. I hear people all the time, I got hurt in the church. So what? Everybody gets hurt in the church. People used to tell me all the time, well, I've got 5 people in my church that have been hurt, really wounded by prophets. I said, really? I've got several thousand people in ours that have all been hurt by pastors. We're all hurting each other. And everybody's been hurt. Get over it. Get over it. There's your counsel. The priests could not have scabs. A scab was an unhealed wound. We cannot have unhealed wound. We cannot have unforgiveness in our life. We'll never get there. Priests couldn't have scabs because if they had unhealed wounds, you couldn't touch them. You can't get close to them. We've got to get over all that stuff. And that means forgiveness. That means being a real Christian and walking in basic Christianity, which is forgiving one another. And seizing every opportunity to grow in that forgiveness, grow in that love by forgiving each other. It just can't happen any other way. As I tell people when they used to come to me for marriage counseling, I tell them this relationship has been ordained in heaven from the foundation of the world to kill you both. And you cannot survive marriage if you don't die. You're both going to die. Now, it's a good killing. It's worth it. But you're going to die. And you got all these endorphins going off in your mind now that's making you crazy. It's a trap. It's a trap. He's going to get you. Now, the body of Christ is like that. I mean, it's a true marriage. We don't need another ceremony because the ceremony was the cross. It is the cross. We have been born into a family, and there's no escape but to die and seize every opportunity that you might start to truly live and live by resurrection power. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.